Level up your LA Kings experience with Vivid Seats Elite Seats. All the on-ice Kings action with even more exclusive access and rewards. Enjoy great seats to the game in Section 103 along with Yamava Club access and parking included with your purchase. Plus, get a free Team LA Kings shop item at the game. Score your Vivid Seats Elite Seats tickets today and earn perks on each purchase from the only leading ticket company with a rewards program. Experience it live with Vivid Seats, the official partner of the LA Kings. Do you know the LA Kings have their own culinary partner? It's Superfood, celebrating 10 years and over 1 million meals served. Since 2020, the Kings have trusted Superfood to fuel their players. Now through Simply Lunch, you can bring that same performance-driven food to your office. Because when people eat better, they work better. Visit mysuperfood.com. That's mysuperfd.com. Or call 213-973-6145. Qualified companies can enjoy a free lunch for up to 10 managers.
Left wing Panarin, cross ice pass, Clark right circle, center, score! Near post, Adrian Kempe tips in, Clark centering.
You're listening to All the Kings Men, the official podcast of the LA Kings.
Kopitar battling with Matthew Schaefer, right corner, centering Kopitar to Panarin, shoots and scores! Artemi Panarin opens the scoring and opens his account in Los Angeles. The cross-ice feed from Ajay.
Now, here's your host, Jesse Cohen.
All right, it is Monday morning. That means it's time to crown another King of the Week. Joining me to help me out this week, host of Kings Talk, Sam Betesh. How are you doing today, Sam?
Jesse, I am doing fantastic. I know you have certainly sort of laid the groundwork here on not only Kings Talk, but what you've established here with all the Kings Men. I got to say it. I love the reaction that people have to this and what you've established as a rhythm to this in regards to crowning a king each week. I love a good bit, and this is a good one.
Now, you and I don't know each other that well, so you won't know this, but I have a real strong aversion to using nicknames. So I won't be calling you Samboni. I apologize. But
guess what? I don't like nicknames. There you go. There's the checklist on the week. You said it out loud. So it is recorded now forever, right? If we need it, you have we have a recording of you saying Samboni. And I got to say, I'll give credit to my friend Boris, who really was just joking. And then I thought, oh, that might have legs. I might have to just sort of test it. And certainly in the hallways, in the hallways at ESPN LA, it has taken off.
Sure.
I still wonder, I mean, it's one of those, it's like sort of one of those obvious things that you sort of have to lean into in a way. So, but I'm happy to be Sam or Sammy or whatever.
Well, I will call you Sam. And I also, I've said this to most of the players we've interviewed. I won't refer to them by their nickname. I prefer to call them I prefer to use the pronunciation of their name from where they're from. And I discovered quite by accident that there's only one person I can think of that I actually do refer to exclusively by their nickname. And that's Steve Dorfman, also known as Hoover.
That's a good one.
Because when I was introduced to him as Hoover. And it was about 2 years after being introduced to him that I realized that Hoover wasn't actually his name. I think awesome. I had a conversation with him about why did your parents name you Hoover? He's like,
that's hilarious. He's like, no,
that's a nickname, right? I didn't realize it. So
question then for you, Jesse. So a nickname, mine's clearly like this made up thing. Juice is clearly not, some version of his name. What about the idea, like Laferriere as Laffy, Kopitar as Kopi? What about those that are just the shortenings that sort of happen over time?
The longer I know somebody, the more likely I am. So I will refer to Zach Dooley probably 50-50 as Zach or Duels when I'm talking to him. Or if he's walking down the hallway and I need to get his attention, I might say Duels.
Okay.
I don't like Laffy, Kopi, Brownie, Greener, etc. Just because I don't know. I don't know them.
Fair.
And so it feels, I don't know. Growing up, my dad, this is probably what it boils down to. My dad would always refer to players by their last name, right? So when you're sitting in the car driving home from a game or you're at the game or you're talking about the game, you say, oh yeah, did you see that pass from Kopitar to Brown? And he never was a Kopi to Brownie kind of guy. So I grew up not being that kind of guy. And I know a lot of people who have named their pets, Kopi or whatever. And so in my mind, it's like a pet name. And I don't mean pet name as in a name for pets, but in the full sense of it's an affectionate name and I don't know them well enough.
It's too adorable. I get it. And then there's some like Pears is an interesting one where I didn't like that. I thought it was sort of unnecessary for Perry to have a nickname. His name and Pears is good, right?
And like somebody was it? I think somebody called him Worms one time.
Well, yeah, exactly.
And I was like, I'm sorry. I'm an old man. I have silver in my beard. I'm not referring to anybody as worms. Like, I'm just not going to do it.
I think it's fair. I think it's fair.
Other people can do it, and that's fine. I'm
playing by your rules today, Jesse.
Way too much time on my preference for nicknames, which the listeners are totally tired of. Whoa, what was that? All right, so we're going to get into it. Oh, before we get into it, actually, and I told you before I hit the record button, we're going to cheat a little bit this week because longtime listeners will know I have a convention, I guess, for lack of a better word, where if a player scores his first goal, that is usually good enough to lock them up for at least an honorable mention. But in 3 short games this week, by the way, we're talking about the loss to Colorado, the victory over New York, and the loss to Montreal, the first 3 games of DJ Smith's tenure as head coach of the LA Kings. Scott Laughton scored his first goal as an LA King. Angus Booth scored his first goal as an LA King and was rewarded by being loaned back to Ontario. And Jared Wright scored his first point. And so I didn't want to slight any of them, but I also was not realistically going to have all 3 of those guys take up all 3 spots. So I just wanted to mention all 3 of them. And Sam, if you have anything to say about, if you named one of those guys as your honorable mention runner-up or king of the week, we can save the conversation to later. But I'm assuming you didn't pick all 3. So if you want to weigh in on Angus Booth or either of the other 2 gentlemen that you may not have picked.
All tremendous names that I went through. And I had my own system, Jesse. And at some point you'll explain to me sort of your system on doing this and how you come up with this. And I know a lot of it is just graded on a Jesse Cohen curve. And that's
pretty much totally made up.
Okay, that's fair. But I also had given a little credence to the idea of firsts and how much those should matter. And yeah, I mean, you're talking first NHL point. I mean, Wright deserves it, especially for how spectacular the play itself was.
Yeah.
Not only what it took from a speed standpoint, even the final move to get past, and I can't remember who he really jumped through to get to the puck, and then the backwards pass. I mean, all of that. Yeah. This is not just a happenstance first point. This is one of those plays for the season that we'll remember, and it's his first point. So I love that. But the Laughton thing is fascinating to me, and here's why. And Booth tied the Avalanche game. If we're grading Avalanche losses this season, which is unfortunately all we have from that quote unquote rivalry this season, that's the moment the best moment the Kings have had against Colorado would be tied at 2, right? I mean, so Booth has that moment where you think, oh, there's a chance. So I love that. But Laughton, I gave credit to the idea that you're in New York playing a game, in Toronto at home with your cats. And if you don't know the cat story, the post game from yesterday was interesting. But he leaves everything from Toronto and comes back. I thought there was a real question whether he would play at all in the game against Montreal. Not only does he play, he makes an impact, which I think is going to be a negative impact because Montreal takes the lead on a play where Laughton is clearly trailing, right? I mean, it's his bad of all the my bads.
Somebody text there. I saw I can't remember who said it, but somebody described it as he got worn like a cape.
Well, and only because Trevor Moore does it worse later does it get a little right. But then Laughton scores the goal that gives us all the life in the world for the third period. And it's not. And by the way, as nice as the right pass was, that was a surprise shot by Laughton. That's why that was in the net. I mean, it was surprising and it was precise in the placement. I loved all of it. So I liked Laughton in the idea that you're here with this brand new team. I was watching him during warmups. It was a lot of like, hey, like, who are these guys? I mean, you could tell Laughton had not spent a ton of time with the guys. So I love an immediate impact like that. But again, it's all honorable mention, but they all deserved oxygen in this episode.
Yes, agreed. Totally agreed. And the right thing, there was some question, we're recording this on Sunday the 8th, but the game was played on the Saturday the 7th. And there was some question going into the 4 p.m. game. So there's no morning skate. So we didn't really have any idea. And the trading deadline was Friday. And Holland had been non-committal on whether Matthew Joseph would be there. Scott Laughton was like, probably, but we don't know. Quentin Byfield was skating in a red no contact jersey on Saturday morning. So he was kind of questionable. So we're like, all right, we're going to have to literally watch warmups to see who's even available, much less who's going to play. Then they recall Jared Wright in the middle of the day, but not Kenny Connors. And Holland has his commentary when he spoke to the media about, these kids are going to play, whether it's in Ontario or LA. So yes, so the fact that Jared Wright got a point, and as you said, not only got the point, but honestly, the Lawton goal doesn't happen if Jared Wright doesn't make the play. And I definitely don't want to, and I caught myself scolding people yesterday because that's what I am. I'm a scold. Jared Wright is very noticeable because he's incredibly fast.
I mean, when you're using adjectives for players and a lot of things, I love it. Usually draft is usually where you hear adjectives about players and you hear a lot of the same things and you get a little worn down by what that word means and you take it for granted. And speed in the NHL is something that a lot of guys have. But in a world of fast skaters, Jared Wright is also fast.
He's so fast that, this is the litmus test that people love to use for any sport. If a bunch of aliens came down not knowing anything about the sport, they would notice Jared Wright. Unfortunately for Jared Wright, Kings fans of a certain vintage, which is just my way of saying old, will remember Austin Wagner and Craig Johnson, who were also both very fast and who also, or I shouldn't say also because Jared Wright hasn't had his career yet, but Austin Wagner, I believe, is out of the league at this point. If not, he's kicking around somewhere. And Craig Johnson is a coach now, so he's definitely out of the league as a player. Craig Johnson was a solid contributing third-line player. Austin Wagner never lived up to his own hype, I would argue.
Certainly.
But so Jared Wright is fast, no doubt, and he gets into the corners, but there have been fast guys who went into the corners who didn't do much. Everybody sees a fast player and they immediately want them to be Connor McDavid.
And they're not all going to be McKinnon.
They're not. They're definitely not. So I am excited to see a fast player because they are noticeable. They draw the eye and they can accomplish a lot. And frankly, I didn't understand why Wright wasn't out there with the goalie pulled late in the game, if for no other reason than to chase down pucks that happened to trickle into the neutral zone. But yeah, that play, that Lawton goal only happens because Jared Wright made a play assisted by his speed, but not because of his speed, if that makes any sense.
No, absolutely. Again, chasing that down. He's got the speed to nullify an icing, and that there's not a ton of guys that are doing. In the league, once the league changed that rule and you didn't have to get all the way to the boards and touch the puck, which is a fine rule, but it really took away a lot of the race for the puck in regards to icing. But Jared Wright brings that back. He now has that capability to go and get one when otherwise it would have gone the other way and been a whistle. So I love it for that. And you talk about the kids, which I think Holland has now dubbed a number of the guys the kids, and Jared Wright is in that group.
Totally.
I like it. I love when I like when Perry was on the line sort of as the elder statesman with the younger players. I thought that was a very cool idea, and who knows what Wright weaned from Perry over that time. But yes, of all the three you said, Jared Wright's got the greatest stamp from the week because that play is highlight reel worthy.
Okay, so we're not going to get into then deep conversations about guys with their first points. So we're going to go ahead and start with you, Sam, your honorable mention this week.
So this was interesting. I'm going to give a little, and I'm sure you've done this many times, that you're sort of crossing people off. These are like the honorable mention of the honorable mention. So there was a huge part of me that when you and I first discussed this and you went through the concept and the bit with me, I thought, how am I going to stay away from DJ Smith being on this list? Right? These are his first 3 games. How do you get out of the way of the fact that Hiller's gone? DJ Smith is close with Hiller. He's been a part of the coaching staff. He's clearly established something new from a style standpoint, and even from the comments from the players that would otherwise be stale and suggesting that nothing new has happened. Everyone has admitted, no, it sounds different. It feels different. We're playing different. Obviously, there's all the hits against Colorado. There's all the shots in the first periods that we've seen in the last 2 games. There's speed, the lines being established. There's clearly something there. Unfortunately, we haven't collected the points the way we want to, but you'd have to say DJ Smith, there's clearly a before and after in regards to DJ Smith for what you and I have seen, in the trenches for this team. And part of me wanted to also mention Matt Green. And I was thinking, all right, how could you not say the coaches, Green for his first opportunity to wear the A on 2 Stanley Cup championships? How do you not say Green or Smith in all of this? But then, you know what I decided? You know what took me out of it?
Was when I told you that I get to assign your points if you go off the roster.
I do. I wanted to stay true. I like a good bit staying true to the rules. And so there was that. But also what really swayed me away from it was Matt Green is penalty kill specialist before even getting this job. And largely the game is lost against Montreal because you had to kill 1 penalty and you couldn't.
Yeah.
And so I just thought, you know what? I can talk about some of the positives, but I'm not going to assign you and say you're worthy of anything more than anything the players did. If in the end we needed one really, really strong coaching moment from the two of them, which was, hey guys, there's 5 minutes left. We're pissed about the penalty. And I understand they had called their timeout earlier, so they couldn't do that. But there's still a matter of getting that message through to everybody of, guys, 5 minutes and we got 2 points. Like, let's do what we got to do. That didn't happen, and it unraveled quickly. So that's it. 6 minutes.
You're not wrong about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's it. I just that's one where, because if you're looking at the difference between Hiller and Smith, it was the disaster of the Colorado game, the Vegas game, game the week prior, where you've got the lead, because that's what this Montreal game harkened back to. It was the Vegas game that you gave up the lead, and the awful Tampa game where they gave up the lead late at home as well. Yeah. So the fact that Smith has one that we otherwise would have said was like a classic Hiller, this team's not all bought in, or whatever you might have wanted to assign to that. Well, now there's an ugly one on Smith too. So I wasn't going to give it all to coaching, even though I gave all the positives.
Totally
so
fair.
Honorable mention is simply going to be this. And the irony here is that he's got the most points of the week. But I'm going to go Brandt Clarke. It was one of those where I thought going into this that I clearly had it in my head who had points this week and who didn't. Well, Brandt Clarke's got 5 points on the week. I mean, Brandt Clarke's been all over this score sheet, and in a week where, it felt like you won 2 games, but you only won 1. But Brandt Clarke clearly, and I would also say through even the Hiller era, the one guy that consistently went with you got to get more pucks on net, the one guy who clearly embodies that for the Kings night in and night out is Brandt Clarke. And I like that on the power play, on 5-on-5. Brandt Clarke understands getting the puck towards the net's the best way to get it in it. He does that again and again, and it's no coincidence that he's got the 5 points. Clarke, even though he's got the most, is the honorable mention as our king of the week. I'm clearly on Clarke for honorable.
I think you and I may wind up going 3 for 3 matching, because I also have Brandt Clarke as my honorable mention. And I also looked at points and realized, yes, he's got the most points on the week. Not only does he have the most points on the week, he's also a +3, which doesn't lead the team. But for a defenseman who played 21 minutes and 48 seconds in a week where they have 2 losses and 1 win, and, they gave up 4 goals against Colorado and 4 against Montreal. And they have 2 power play goals, which you don't get a plus for. So Brandt Clarke obviously having a great week. And I was a little stunned that he wasn't out there again with the goal he pulled against Montreal, but that's a conversation for a later time. But not only is he obviously having an impact offensively, but he's also starting to make really solid plays defensively. And I was talking, I don't remember who I was talking to about this, but Sam, if I asked you to tell me for the entire season, and these conversations are meant to be week to week, but just for S&G, if I asked you to tell me who led the team for the season so far in blocked shots, who would you guess?
So I would not guess Clarke. I mean, that's
right. But contextually, you can clearly see that that's where I'm going.
It's exactly. And he's really not, I'm not saying he's not on the list. He's a defenseman, so I'm going to get there eventually. But I'm certainly thinking of Dumoulin and Doughty. Those are just naturally, that's where I'm going to go. So
Edmondson, Doughty, Anderson, he's like the big guys that kill penalties and play D. No, it's Brandt Clarke.
That's great. That's amazing to hear.
Yeah.
And by the way, to your point about the offense, but also the defense, we're also talking about a week where Doughty didn't play. I believe Doughty didn't play one of the games. And there was at least times certainly that we know that Doughty was out. He was hanging out with us in the upstairs. And that also puts Clarke in a different position over the course of those games. Games without Doughty, Clarke is, all of a sudden now he's got a little more of that he's got to abide to, and he's done it.
For these 3 games, by the way, block shots, Mikey Anderson, 11, Joel Edmondson 7, Cody Ceci 6 or 8. No, 6. Sorry, my eyes are terrible. And Brandt Clarke also 6. I would expect over a full season that would kind of be how it would be distributed. But like I said, Brandt Clarke actually leading the way. But there was that one game, was it the Colorado game, where did they have 22 block shots or something insane like that? It was
amazing. I mean, that game, it's such a shame. I mean, there's many games this season where we've got nothing to show for it other than post-game commentary where we all can feel good about the effort. But that Colorado game, both entertaining in it, and unfortunately just another 0 on the board, but there was a lot there. And then the hits, which I had gotten into a conversation about, where do you stand on hits in this league? Yes, that was the game where we out hits so significantly Colorado, but then hits is kind of like tackles in football sometimes, right? Could mean that you're trailing in the wrong way if you're hitting a ton.
Yeah,
so
100%.
Yeah.
If you have the ability to collect 33 hits in a game, it just means the other team's carrying the puck
exactly
way more than you are. All right, so we agree on honorable mention, Sam. Then your runner up.
So runner up's one that I really thought it was going to be obvious. 1500th game, scoring the goal. I thought Kopitar was going to be the star. I thought he was going to be king of the week. I just did. And I really, and last night shouldn't have swayed me from that. It shouldn't have. It really took me falling asleep on the concept to not have Kopitar as king of the week. I think I went to bed Kopitar king of the week and woke up with something else. I will truly tell you that. All right. So Kopitar's runner up. And, he's got 3 points. That's not even second best on the week. Kempe's got 4. Clark, we already said, has 5. But Kopitar is back in a position on this team, Jesse, where he's the alpha dog. I mean, center on this line, and considering what this line now means, we're relying on offense again. We've been relying on the faceoff circle all along, but we are now relying on offense from Kopitar, and he looks every bit prepared to do it. There were 2 games where I thought Kempe set him up numerous times and he did not finish. So maybe that's what I woke up with today going, he could have even had more. Kopitar, as much as I've seen Kopitar, as much as he clearly stood out, did you hear what Holland said at the end, on trade deadline day? I think it was Duels who asked him about Kopitar's 1500th game. And Kenny said, not only 1500 games, look what he did in his 1500th game, because I believe he played 25 minutes, right? I mean, and then he follows it up with the goal and getting everybody on the right foot in the Montreal game. And I'm thinking he's got to be king of the week. We'll find out in a little bit why that's not the case, but worth a lot of conversation here is what Kopitar's doing top line. Considering now, it's a shame it took this long to have a top line this season, but now the top line is so distinguished and recognizable, and he is right there in the middle of it, creating and stirring. And even if you look at the Panarin goal in the Islanders game, not enough was discussed about the pass because for a guy like Panarin to be in front of the net with time to choose his spot the way he was on a non-power play, right? On a 5-on-5 situation, for a guy like Panarin to be in front of the goalie in what looks like a practice setup. Go look at the pass that set that up. So Kopitar, clearly runner up. We can debate why, maybe, king of the week. It's like this works both ways, Jesse. Like when you're calling a guy runner up, you're somehow like knocking him, but he's also the runner up. He's also the second best king of the week. So I want to give that credit, and he doesn't always get those flowers. Kopitar, the runner up for me for sure.
So I had a hunch, but I wasn't sure. But in fact, I think now we are going to go 3 for 3 because I also have Kopitar as the runner up, and it boils down to essentially for me exactly what you said about Ken Holland, which is that in his 1500th game, he had an incredible game. And I'm going to take a victory lap here, and I probably will never stop running this victory lap. When the Kings acquired Artemi Panarin and we had our first media availability with Jim Hiller, I asked, might you start with Kopitar, Panarin, and Kempe? And he very flatly said, no, we're going to go with Laferriere. And in the moment, I thought oh, well, maybe I'm dumb and I don't understand. Maybe I'm just underthinking this or overthinking or whatever. And it turns out, no, you should have always gone. And I have to wonder, and we'll never know, I have to wonder what the team would have looked like had they just started with Kopitar, Panarin, and Kempe. Because when those 3 guys hook up on a play, Sam, and we've seen now, 4 or 5 goals from them, they're gorgeous.
What about the accidental goal they scored?
Yeah.
I mean, Jesse, think about this. So a credit to you. I was right behind you. I waited until that tic-tac-toe goal to ask Jim Hiller the same question, right? You remember that, right? We're in the room and I'm like, well, now they're clearly going to be on the same line, right? And it was like, well, no, because again, it didn't even happen right there either.
30 seconds together that night?
There's a shift change where they happen to be out there. It's on the list of top 3 goals of the season for this team.
I think it's in contention for the prettiest goal of the season.
No question. When you consider everybody's involvement on that, I do like the Kuzmenko, I'm forgetting who, but there was a Kuzmenko just singular effort, which I think is number 1, but he just kind of undressed numerous people. But in regards to having a primary assist, a secondary assist, and a buried goal, there isn't a better one this season. And that was on a shift change. It's not even, it wasn't on the power play that they put together. It was by accident that the 3 are out there, and it creates magic immediately. Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, no, so and of course now we've seen, to your point about the Panarin goal, where I actually just felt terrible for Sorokin because
and no stick, right?
Yeah, just having to stare down a guy that is gonna, and Panarin, to his credit, took the half a beat before burying it. But the pass was beautiful, and Kopitar and Kopitar to me has looked faster in the last 2 or 3 games than he has all year. And last year, when they acquired Kuzmenko at the trade deadline, I think Kuzmenko went 7 games without a point before then scoring, a ton of points. And so it occurred to me last night, what if the 6 games that we've just seen out of Panarin are a similar, adjustment period, I'm using heavy air quotes, for playing with Kopitar? And what if we're about to see Panarin and Kopitar and Kempe combined for just some stupid, ungodly amount of points? Now, unfortunately, they'd have to go, I think, 15-5 at this point to realistically make the playoffs, which is not impossible, but boy, is it tough. The math and those 5 losses can't include the 2 against the Mammoth, the 1 against the Kraken, and I think they've got 1 against Edmonton left.
It's so interesting that we talk about wins and losses this season, and we have to be. But when we do that, we have to recognize the overtime loss point, which is the reason this team is even still in a conversation. If not for overtime loss,
I'm sorry, I have to do this. I refuse to refer to it as a loser point. It's a bonus point.
Okay, I like that.
When 2 teams are tied after 60 minutes, and I've gone on rants on different. I know you're friends with Eddie Garcia. I yelled at Eddie about this on his show. If 2 teams are tied after 60 minutes, that game has ended in a tie. There is then a carnival game played to award an extra point, but people have this attitude that they got rid of ties. They did not. Ties still exist. We've just added on some goofy carnival game to award an extra point so that the children in the audience can go home feeling like that somebody won.
So it's so fascinating. You and I can have an entire separate podcast one day about overtime, because here's the thing. I think you and I agree on one thing. I'd love 2 columns. I think Americans also love wins, losses. And you even just said 15-5, right? You're not dissecting what else would need to happen. You're just saying 15-5. We know it's not going to be that. I love the idea of wins and losses and really boiling it down to that, just to make it simple. The other thing is, I have a feeling you don't agree with me, but I love the 3-on-3. To me, if you're going to have a carnival, the 3-on-3 was finally the league figuring that carnival out.
It's not for me. You're right. I do not agree with you.
That's okay. That's okay. I like it better than 4-on-4. Sure. And I like it better than the shootout. I think that's all. If I'm ranking those things, that's what I like.
We agree on that. But one of my favorite, the best of a list of terrible options is still a terrible option.
That's totally fair. I would say this much. I mean, playoff hockey's perfect. So I don't think you and I would disagree with that. The overtime format of 5-on-5 and letting it go. If the argument is we don't want people on the ice all night, I think 3-on-3, if you just let it happen, every game would end in about 6 or 7 minutes.
Well, like you said, it's a conversation for a later day.
Exactly.
I have very strong opinions. Anybody listening probably knows. So we both agree that Kopitar is the runner-up. Brent Clark is the honorable mention. I'm willing to bet we both agree on King of the Week, but I'll let you start us off then.
So it's almost a holistic 20,000 feet above sea level in this answer. And I didn't want to also name somebody that probably, very well could have been it last week. But when you simply look at the impact on this team, and I think it came to me, what I woke up with this morning was I was given an assignment on Friday. Hey, Sam, could you do us a favor and hand in 60 seconds on the trade deadline? And I was going through it and looking at it, and I was deep into the conversation that you and Dooley had about, the second round picks versus the third round conditional. And I'm like, what did we collect here? And then it just came to me. And I thought, if I'm talking 60 seconds about the trade deadline and I'm thinking about Friday or even Thursday night with Fogle, I'd be a fool to not also spend 30 seconds talking about Artemi Panarin. This trade deadline was about the acquisition of Artemi Panarin in the end. Yeah. That's simply it. That's what happened. Lawton's a nice, adorable piece here as well for a team that needs a center. But this trade deadline is about giving up nearly nothing to get Artemi Panarin. Panarin has an impact. It's 3 points. I understand if we're stacking points, he's not the king of the week in regards to collecting points, but it's his impact. And then somehow the jersey change, I'm going to give him credit for this, Jesse. Number one, he gives a Rolex to Bailey for the 72. Okay, adorable. We all know that's like this cute thing that's happening. But when the jersey became 10 and I see the top line as 9, 10, 11, and all of a sudden it dawns on me even more, this top line is that good. When you look at Colorado, when you look at Edmonton, when you look at Minnesota, when you're looking at Tampa, when you're looking at Carolina, like these teams, even Montreal's top line, you're looking at these teams that have such a clearly established top line where you're wondering what's going to be the matchup for the other team. As far as game planning for the Kings now, 9, 10, 11 has to be dealt with. That has to be reckoned with. And the only reason this team has a top line in the conversation with the teams I just mentioned is because a guy you and I never dreamt about being an LA King is an LA King. Artemi Panarin is the king of the week. And to your point, if this team goes 15-5, he's going to be the king of the week all of those weeks.
Yeah.
That's what's going to have to happen.
On the table. Yeah, that's possible.
Yeah, that's it. So I just think this guy does things that there are players, there are people that called Kings Talk and said to me, Sam, how come we don't have a Celebrini, right? We don't have a Bedard. It's like there's no point in time where you can just say, like, this guy's going to do that thing and make the difference in one moment. That conversation's out the door. There's a guy now that can make that thing happen in a moment, in a phone booth, on that line. Credit to him. He makes Kopitar better. He puts Kempe in a great spot to be creative. Panarin is the guy.
So congratulations, you have correctly identified the king of the week because it is Artemi Panarin. And I deliberately left him off the list of guys scoring their first goals in LA King because it wasn't his first point. He had already collected a handful of points, but he also got his first goal as a King. And it was that goal against Sorokin where he was just standing there staring him down. And so you and I have already talked earlier in the year, although I'm not sure if you realized you were talking to me when it happened.
I do. Because someone actually said, I don't know if you said Jesse from LA. I think someone actually had told me. Yeah. But I think I then realized as soon as I heard the voice, I go, okay, this is definitely Jesse. Let's go. Yeah.
So the conversation I'm referencing is the conversation Sam and I had, I think the first game of the year.
I think it was.
The question was, is Kopitar the greatest king of all time? And you still maintain it's Wayne Gretzky. And of course, then it just becomes a question of semantics, because are we talking about the best player who ever was that happened to wear a Kings jersey, or are we talking about the best Kings career and whatever? So when I say what I'm about to say, understand that I mean it in a very specific way and other people can parse out what I mean. I think I don't think the Kings have ever had a player like Artemi Panarin.
It's a I will go with you. Do you remember what I asked Ken Holland when we had a first chance to talk to Holland after this trade? I asked him, I said, Ken, in your career, you have collected, right? You've acquired incredible Hall of Fame talent and won Stanley Cups with them. Like Panarin's on that list, isn't he? And he had no problem agreeing with that.
So the reason I use the phrase a player like Panarin is because obviously the Kings have had high scoring players. Most of them have been centers. And the wingers that have been, like, I don't ever want to say Artemi Panarin is a better winger than Luc Robitaille, because Luc Robitaille, until Alex Ovechkin came along, was the greatest scoring left winger in NHL history. But Luc Robitaille, and I don't think this is a knock on Luc Robitaille, and to be clear, as I've said many times, I have a poster on my wall as a kid and 3 jerseys hanging in my closet. Luc Robitaille was a goal scorer. Luc Robitaille was the kind of guy who, on his back, right before, Alexander Ovechkin invented, sliding goals on his back, scoring over his head. Luc Robitaille was the guy, the first highlight goal that would pop up if you looked for on his back, on his belly, in front of the goals. Artemi Panarin is a 2 assists per goal guy in his career. And people have mentioned Ziggy Palffy, and listen, I loved Ziggy Palffy. I was the perfect age when Ziggy Palffy was here. And Ziggy Palffy was great. I loved watching Ziggy Palffy. But Artemi Panarin's better than Ziggy Palffy, or if he's not, we'll never know, because Ziggy Palffy had injuries, and what are you going to do? But like I said, I just don't think the Kings have ever had a player like Artemi Panarin, and the true shame of it is that we know Kopitar is going to retire, and so at absolute most, the very absolute most, we have 48 games at the most and 20 games at the least of these 3 guys playing together. Because if they go to the playoffs and if somehow they win the cup, winning each round in 7 games, my math is not fantastic, but I believe 4 times 7 is 28.
That's going to be 28 plus 20.
Yeah. So at the very, very, very most, 48, not likely to happen for a number of different reasons. I don't think there's ever been any team that goes
7-7. I think someone went 7-7-7, but then the final was
the Kings did, but it was 7-7-7-5. And also, I just don't think they're going to make the playoffs at this point, sadly. But regardless, it's just a shame that, Kopitar finally, and also and this is another bugaboo of mine, Sam, which you will have only known if you listened for 17 years. The list of players that we could go down that were brought in theory, to play with Kopitar, who then within a week found themselves on another line, is tremendous. And really the only 3 names I can think of that were brought in to play with Kopitar that had success through his entire career: Ryan Smith, who didn't last very long and left before there was any sort of meaningful success on the team; Marian Gaborik, who showed up, played out for, that playoff run and was incredible. And then the next year had a pretty solid season and then was hurt and then gone. And now Artemi Panarin. And in the meantime, you've got your Dustin Penners, your Milan Lucic, your Victor Arvidsson, your Ilya Kovalchuk, just guy after guy after guy. So for them to get Panarin and for the head coach to be like, nah, we're not going to do that. And then for them to immediately, for the opposite to happen, for them to get Panarin with well, where's he going to play? We don't know. It's not going to be with Kopitar. And then sort of the opposite of the typical story of him showing up and immediately demonstrating that, no, you don't worry about what hand the player shoots with. You put 2 Hall of Fame incredible players together. Let them figure it out. Exactly.
And it's so true.
Artemi Panarin, there were a couple shifts, Sam, where I saw him, and I actually texted a friend of mine who's a New York Rangers fan and asked him, does Panarin have an ounce of puck hog in him? Because there were a couple of shifts where I saw him holding onto the puck for a little bit too long, and I didn't know if it was because he maybe had just a touch of puck hog, or if because nobody on the ice was giving him anything to do with the puck. And what I settled on was there wasn't a play for him, so he was like, well, all right, well, I guess I'll just have to hang on to it, and I'll take it.
And then it took a while. I remember Hiller even saying, maybe a few more pucks on the net from him. Yeah. And it's true. He wasn't throwing it at the net immediately. And that's why it was assists and not goals to start. But funny that you mentioned Gaborik. I remember talking about when Panarin showed up here, wondering, where is he in regards to what's similar to what this team has done in the past along those lines. Carter was the first guy that came to mind. Admittedly, my dad's from Philadelphia. And so I remember how the impact of Carter, Richards, Gagne, Williams, like that, there was just all of that. Even Hextall, Lombardi. Yeah, Philly East, right?
Philly East,
it was so much of that.
West LA East.
That's exactly what it was. Yeah. So I thought Carter at first, and then I went back through and really looked through the history. And when I saw Gaborik's name, I just go, wow, how did I not think of that? Considering the Rangers piece also, right? Like Gaborik was the former Ranger as well. Yeah. So they really were symbiotic in that way. And you are right. For Panarin to be told you're not playing with that guy, and then to find it on that happenstance 30-second shift where they're just on the ice accidentally, it's so beautiful to see what this has brought out of Kopitar. And I've said it to people, Kershaw and Kopitar have this same sort of final season, right next to one another. Kopitar has more in the tank than Kershaw did. Kershaw had a moment for the Dodgers. He certainly did, where there was this stamp of a game in the season. But Kopitar is contributing now in a way that he only could if he had a player of this stature, Jesse. And he has got it, and that guy is bringing it out of him, period.
And what I immediately thought of when you mentioned Kershaw was, yes, but the Dodgers also had Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, and
the greatest player that's ever played.
And there's no salary cap in baseball, so the Kings can't just go and be like, okay, Kopitar, here's Connor McDavid, Alexander Ovechkin, and Sidney Crosby for you to play behind.
No,
but Artemi Panarin does show up, and so I'm gonna say congratulations, Artemi Panarin, this week's King of the Week. So, Sam, one thing that I have been sort of focused on, and it does not matter at all, to be clear, as most of the things that I focus on don't. So we've had 3 games under DJ Smith as head coach. And while I won't say that any of them have been boring or bad, like they all definitely feel different from what came before. However, I have decided that I wanted to rank them in 1, 2, and 3. Which one was best, which one was second, which one was third. Because for me, the Montreal game was clearly a regression after 2 really strong out of the gate. And that could be just because they lost in the last 5 minutes, and that feels a little familiar to this season. But I was totally engrossed with the Colorado game and the Islanders game. Now, the Islanders game was easy because they scored a bunch of goals and had a huge lead most of the night, if not all of the night. the Montreal game I was talking to, again, my dad, and we were talking about it, and he was like, it was a mostly entertaining game. And I was like, no, the first period was great because they outshot them by a wide margin. I was bored for parts of the first period, parts of the second period, and parts of the third. And then the more he broke it down, he was like, yeah, well, there was like a 10-minute stretch in the first that was kind of boring. And then and I was like, by the time he had gone through it, it was like half the game that was boring. And I was like, yeah, well, that's kind of my concern, is that like the Colorado game and the Islanders games felt like high intensity the whole way. And I hope that it's true that is the difference that is being brought. My concern is that I'm not sure how long you can maintain that intensity. It's easy when the playoffs are on the line because every game matters and you can get up for it and everything. But when you're down the stretch and you're constantly looking at the standings, and regardless of how you do, it can all be wiped out or amplified by how Utah or Seattle, like teams that didn't exist 5 years ago. I don't know. I just don't. I worry that the intensity can't be maintained. So I ask you, what do you think about for best game, second best game, and third best game in the DJ Smith era?
So let's throw this out on its head. This is going to be wildly against common sense here. What I'm going to say.
I love it.
So from an entertainment standpoint, the Islanders game is by far the least entertaining. And think about
early.
And think about what made it entertaining. 8.5 minutes of no goalie. What classic Patrick Waugh, where he's got an empty net for 8.5 minutes, right? And the Kings are just throwing it down there and missing, so they're icing it, right? So there's a lot of that, and the Islanders are clearly the better team for all of those 8.5 minutes, but they're down 3 goals and then 2, right? So so in a way that's like not a ton there. So let's just say from an entertainment standpoint, I was thoroughly entertained by the Colorado game most.
Yeah.
And then the Montreal game was interesting. Also, here's what I liked about the Montreal game. Each line scored. Obviously, that goal was taken off the board. Yeah, right. Sure. Right. So Ward's in the crease there and bumping. Right. So there's that. Where that goal,
for the record, I thought was garbage. I thought that was a goal, but that's neither here nor there.
So here's the thing. I saw it the first 2 times and thought, do not challenge. Then I saw a better angle of the check of how he ends up hitting the goalie. That you're right. I think he was clearly steered in there. I mean, he was thrown in there. So that,
and I think underneath the goalie, but before Ward is on top of him.
Exactly. And DJ Smith hit it right. If that was called on the ice another way, impossible to overturn, right? Like that was just going to be one where it was going to be, however it was called, it was going to stand. So I like the balance of the scoring there, and the idea that you have this brand new line with Lawton scoring on the great play we've mentioned by Jared Wright. Your fourth line was doing their thing as the Dogs had numerous chances and did put one in the net that was taken off. And the first 2 lines clearly established. Laffy could have had 2 because he was set up by Byfield earlier and just barely missed wide. So I liked all that. And again, a close game. I also like a French version of O Canada to start the game, so that was also nice.
Hannah does an excellent job with O Canada.
It's great, right? I had not in my recall was not that Hannah version in French, so I loved that. And with Deneau there was like that was all just interesting, and it was post trade deadline, right? You had like the idea, is Lawton going to make an impact, do anything? So there was all of that buildup. And I can't deny, and Jesse, I'll say this all the time. I hate people who talk about if. I've always said, don't give me I and F, give me I and S, like what is, not what if. And what is they lost a Montreal game. But you and I are having such a different conversation today. It's 6 minutes, and you can't deny 6 actual minutes happening. And then that game just absolutely was wiped out in those 6 minutes. But that outcome, considering Seattle, considering what Warren Fogel's new team, the Senators, did to Seattle last night or 2 nights ago by the time of people listening, bottom line is the Kings lost to Montreal, and then hours later, the Kraken also lost. The Kings a point out of the playoffs is so different for this conversation based on the week, based on the trade deadline, based on the coaching change, based on Panarin getting number 10, like all of these things that are going to look so different. And unfortunately, that's the way it goes. So I don't want to talk about the what if, but I can only say that I wish you and I had an opportunity to look at it at a standpoint where this team was staring at 5 points out of a spot, and then had brought it to within 1. That's just a great swing. It's a more dramatic swing. It's more fun for guys like you and I to talk about big items that change the way the room feels. And unfortunately, the room is not that much different as it was.
Yeah. And, I mentioned earlier that when I say 15-5, it's a totally made up number. I just think they have 62 points right now. 92 to me feels like the baseline number for confidence, not even necessarily to get in or not get in. Maybe it's 84 or 88 points. Maybe it's 94, but 92 has to be like around there. But frequently, and it feels like it's happening more and more as this season gets on, I will have an immediate reaction to something. And then a few days later, I'll stop and I'll go, maybe I was a little bit too optimistic about that. And so just tracking back to the trade deadline, people asked me, what do you think about Joseph and Lawton as acquisitions? And I was like, great. Didn't cost you anything for Joseph. Literally. I mean, honestly, yes, it cost the organization money, but who cares?
That's barely a trade deadline. Like, it's funny. Yeah. I don't even know. Like, Joseph happens simply because of something St. Louis did. It's not necessarily right. I mean,
not a trade. So little, he's available. They pick him up. League minimum, prorated. Like I said, he gets a paycheck, but it doesn't impact my ability to care or think about or root for the team. Except that, this is why I say I was a little bit too optimistic. Now with Lawton and Joseph, and Lawton and Joseph both have played for Smith at different stops in their careers and his career. If Byfield's in, and if Joseph's in, Jared Wright is the obvious next man to come out of the lineup. But then you don't have any extra skaters. And then if Armia comes back, or God forbid somebody else gets hurt, and also I have no idea what the lines are. Like, we've got a first line and we've got a fourth line. And frankly, as much as I like Hellenius, Malott, and Ward, I think there's a little bit of overestimating because this team hasn't had a fourth line in I don't know how long, and the organization I think overthought it for a while. And so Hellenius, Malott, and Ward, it seems kind of obvious, but Hellenius, Malott, and Ward I don't think are a fourth line on a cup contending team.
It's also ridiculous that this season, tell me if I'm wrong, that the line this team figured out first was its fourth line. I hate that kind of happened. I mean, it really did. It was like, how is it that the fourth line was the only one that was obvious for so many games?
I'll make it worse. They didn't figure it out. It happened.
Yeah.
Because of injury.
Yeah.
Like, nobody cooked that lineup in a lab and said, you know what might work on the ice is three tall guys who all play tough. It was like, this guy got hurt, that guy that got hurt, that guy got hurt. And they were like, well, I guess we need bodies, so go out there and play. And then they were like, oh, hey, look at that. 3 guys who play tough work together. So now I'm just like, all right, well, with everybody healthy and right back in Ontario, which is a shame because part of what made those games entertaining, like we were talking about, was the play of Booth, Connors, and Wright. So with him gone, I guess Byfield, LaFerriere, and Moore, which I suppose makes the third line by default Turcotte, Lawton, and Joseph. But then you're taking a guy like Turcotte, who started the season by having started the season being inserted into a fourth line by fiat of the general manager, near as I can tell, because Holland said in the offseason that Turcotte would start on the fourth line. Then because of the Deneau trade and injuries, he was sort of moved up to the third line. All Turcotte's done all year long is win faceoffs and and play wherever they put him, whether it was in between Kuzmenko and Fiala, right, which was the de facto top line for a few years.
Are you kidding me? That's the you're right. Before the fourth line, the only thing that was figured out was that finally.
And now he's a winger, and might be a healthy scratch if Armia comes back. So it's like, I still am not confident that this team knows what it is. And if they do make the playoffs, I think it'll have a lot more to do with Seattle. You know, I don't know what Seattle's doing. They went ahead and got Braden Shen, which I think makes them better, but
it should.
I don't know how they run their team, because they're not exactly killing it. Like, and I've said this before, I'm repeating myself at this point. The biggest loss of this season to me, the one thing that will not happen that I think should, is that the entire hockey community is missing out on an ability to dunk on the Golden Knights for not being any good finally. But because it's the Pacific Division, they're leading the division.
And they are. And I was going to ask you, I thought you were going to go in this direction right now. I was going to ask you, Jesse, what is the loss, considering what we saw in Montreal, that game slipping away? What is the worst loss of the season? We're going to have plenty of moments where we talk about silver linings and positives for this team. But I will say, if we're left at the end scratching our head because of a point here and a point there, what will it be? What will we go back to and say? I have a clear cut to me the game that I can't lose in my mind. The game that I have remorse about is someone that's just following all of them. The worst loss of the season is obvious to me. If you want me to go first, I can.
It's got to be Tampa. If it's not Tampa, I'm just going to start yelling at you.
Okay, so that's fine. So you have Tampa. So you have Tampa, and you can explain why. I'll explain mine first. The Seattle game that you're leading and you lose with 24 seconds to go. Remember, Forsberg comes out of the net to play the puck, stumbles coming back to the net. There's a penalty called on that power play that Seattle has. Seattle then ties the game and wins it in overtime. And considering it'll be Seattle that ultimately ends up likely making the playoffs ahead of the Kings, and you don't have a win against Seattle to this point. I understand we have another game, but that... And it also, I think, killed a win streak. At that point, we had won 2 in a row. I think it was the Chicago win, the Utah win, and then it was that Seattle game that was going to look like 3 in a row there, and it didn't happen.
Are we calling that killing a win streak?
So, yeah, you're right. Tough to say. Yeah. But that was, and I think that was the game also where Kuzmenko was like a random healthy scratch for what I thought is no reason. Mm-hmm. So that's the one for me.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, Zach and I talked about this. Yeah. Regardless of whether or not they make it or not, the conversation will be in the summer. What took them so long to make the move they made? And it's whether it's Tampa or Seattle. There was also a loss to Buffalo, and I don't even remember why it sticks out in my mind, other than I remember the post-game press conference being disappointing. It was a 4-1 loss, so it wasn't like dramatic by any stretch. No, it wasn't that one. It was, I would have had to have been that one because that was the only one they played against Buffalo. I didn't realize it was that recent. But there have been a lot of losses where they weren't in it, but they were not in it in a way that was kind of heartbreaking versus those games where they gave up a goal. And I mean, the reality is they've given up so many goals in the last 5 minutes of games that it's hard to and like they all just start blending into one. I was talking to my dad again and just saying, like, the thing about the Montreal game that was so disheartening for me was it followed the script of this season, right? Huge, outplay them by a massive margin in the first, only come away with a single goal or 2.
19-1 was the shot. Yeah. That doesn't happen. Or no, maybe that was 16-1. Sorry, it was 16-1. It was 19-5 against the Islanders. Yeah.
But just like, only like the difference in the Islanders game is they only had a 1-goal lead, but then they followed it up with a strong second.
Yep.
Montreal right back to script. Decent, okay score coming out of the first after massively outplaying them. Terrible second. Now, fortunately, they tied it up at the end, but then get a lead in the third and then choke it away in just crushing fashion. You're just like, okay. So yeah, I say Tampa just because I can't remember how many seconds were left when the game winning goal was scored, but
that one took your breath away more. The Tampa one took your breath away more, and maybe that's why Montreal was a little more like I'd seen it. So whereas the Tampa thing, I hadn't seen it in so long. It was just, to really just steal the win away is what was so staggering about the thing. I hated the other one at home. Remember the Detroit game where we essentially won the game in overtime. I think that was one where Perry came back he technically got credit for 2 goals to tie it late. And then I think it was Fiala was deemed in the crease in overtime. We won that game in overtime and lost it in a shootout. Yeah. I hated that for other reasons. That wasn't as much. The effort was there on that one. And I hate that rule.
I think for me, if you get a point at all,
pretty good. Yeah.
And the Tampa one I'm looking at was Tampa gets a 1-0 lead. Kings score 2 to take a 2-1 lead at the end of the first, or not even halfway through the first. 6 minutes into the first, it's 2-1 Kings. Tampa scores once in the second to tie it up 2-2. And you're like, okay, well, whatever. Kevin Fiala scores a minute 37 into the third to give the Kings a 3-2 lead. Hold on to that 3-2 lead through most of the third. Cirelli scores to make it 3-3 with 16:41 gone in the third. Then I'm not even going to try and pronounce this gentleman's name. Guy I've never even heard of. Scores to give them the lead 18-19 into the third period, and then the empty netter. And it was like, and they needed that game, as I recall.
Needed it. At this point,
January 1st. Yeah. So
no, that was brutal. That one was absolutely, and you're right. And stinging even more is the empty netter. Like of all the things that were going to happen in that one, that was absolutely brutal. Oh,
and it's funny, you said killed a win streak. That one came at the beginning came right before the 2 consecutive wins against Minnesota.
Yes.
That now, who knows? Maybe they win that game. Maybe things go differently. They don't win against Minnesota, but that could have been another 3-game win streak. But I mean, ultimately, that's what we're talking about, is that the longest win streak this team has all season is a 4-game win streak, one of which came in overtime. And I think other than that, they've only had
that was it. Then they
had one 3-game win streak because the Blues win came in a shootout.
Right.
But that's it. Two win streaks of 3 games or more. And that's not good.
No, I've said it all season. Other than collecting the 2-game win streaks is not going to be enough. And I was right. That Seattle one came at the end of what that was going to be a 3-game win streak there. That was the Chicago bounce back 6-0, beating Utah 4-2. And then that Seattle come from ahead loss in overtime. That was
the Seattle and the Calgary. Yeah,
that was it. That was just that was it right there. And by the way,
was a bad loss.
By the way, the Tampa game, now that we're looking at it, the Celebrini game against the Sharks was a pretty rough one.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, that's the problem. There have been so many.
Celebrini tying and essentially winning, right? Yeah, Celebrini tying that game, and then I think he assisted on the winner in overtime. I mean, that was brutal. That was every bit of just, we have the better player that you don't in that one. Yeah, that was, oh man. Yeah. All right. Well, look, I'm glad we ended on such a, no, you know what though? But again, really and truly, I also want to say one thing, which is someone asked me the other day, okay, the Kings, Sam, the Kings changed coaches. They fired their coach. Like, is that bad news? What's going to happen? And I said, well, first of all, in hockey, let's remember a couple of things. 7 teams have fired a coach during the season and won the Stanley Cup. One of them on that list is the Kings. Granted, March is different than December in regards to making that decision. The other thing I wanted to say is a team like the Angels will wallow in this sort of like, what should we do? And they'll hold on to what's happening and just continue to collect the losses. I do appreciate that as an organization, for a team that you can say, and we can all agree that, Los Angeles hockey, like, this is not Original Six, right? We're West Coast, not East Coast. I love that this organization understands that it's won the cup twice and has a certain standard and recognizes we should be better. We can be better. I like that something was done. And I like that tangibly on the ice, you and I can both identify that it looks different. There's a new mood to it at the very least.
It definitely looks different. On the other point, I will simply use my favorite line that I would always say to my buddy, the Royal Half, which is, in many ways, Sam, you and I are very different people. And we'll just leave it at that. But thank you very much for joining me, Sam. You can hear him after every game on Kings Talk. And thanks for listening, Kings fans. We'll talk to you soon.